am very pleased to welcome to the KWMR airwaves Priscilla Heffelfinger, Gina, Gabel, and John Phelan, who are here representing an organization called Thrive. And they're here in person. And I met Priscilla through mutual friends, and she was talking about her work in kind of a modest way. And so I went home and looked it up, and I said, wow, this is very, very cool, and more people should know about it. So, and you're all here, as I understand it, for a retreat for the organization. Is that right, Priscilla?
That is, yeah. We're here for a board retreat.
There you go. Perfect. So board retreat here in Inverness. So I would love for one of you, maybe you, Priscilla, or basically you could tag team it, to talk a little bit how this got started back in 2012.
I'll start it off, and then Gina can take it from there. We started off as a pure accident. I mean, Gina and myself and another woman named Regina moved to Bangladesh with our husband's work. And we would be driving our kids to school, and we'd see kids begging on the streets. So we went to a nearby school in the slums called Jago, and we asked them, what can we do? Thinking Gina had been a teacher back in the U.S., thinking they might want us to help with the classroom, something like that. But the immediate response from that school and then future schools was just, we need some food for these kids. They're either not showing up for school at all, or if they do, they're just super hungry. So we started with no plan, no business plan or anything. We just started delivering bananas once a week. And then Gina started sharing it on Facebook, because that was the hot thing at the time. And people back in the States, she's from Michigan, started to give us money. And Gina, you want to take it from there a little bit?
Yeah, and they realized, like through our work and the pictures we shared, that was just so simple. I mean, these are kids that are not eating. Their families survive on about $1 a day. And they aren't getting the same nutrition that our kids were getting when we were there. And we just saw that injustice. And through the pictures, people back home did too. And it was so easy. It's 50 cents to feed a child one meal. And donations started coming in from overseas. And people that were living in Bangladesh with us, they started bringing food, donating food. So I think our first meal was this little Ziploc bag with a hard-boiled egg, some rice that somebody donated, and some pumpkin soup sprinkled on top. And we brought it to the kids, and they scarfed it up. And we realized from that moment that this is something that needs to continue, and we can't stop feeding the kids. And here we are, 12 years later, doing the same thing with 2,500 kids a day we serve.
Wow. And are there other organizations doing this same type of work in other places? I mean, you said that you just saw a need and decided that this was something that you could do immediately to fill that need and fill those tummies with some nutritious food. And it does make a difference. If you don't have food, you're not going to do very well in school.
There are programs that are similar. In fact, there's a program in South Africa that we emulate called the Lunchbox Fund, and they've been a really helpful guide throughout our work. But most feeding programs are either emergency relief or they're simply rice. And where Thrive is different is we're really focused on the nutritional gap. So we look at what the children need. So, for example, in Bangladesh, there's a really low deficiency in vitamin A. So we make sure we bring in foods that introduce more vitamins, like A for that, for example. And the other thing is that we do it every single day. Programs will sometimes start and stop depending on the funding, but Thrive, when we commit to a school, we stay with them for the long haul. And it's so cool because we see the attendance rates just skyrocket. Parents want their kids to go to school for that free meal, and then the kids want to be at the school to eat that egg and then also to learn, hopefully. So we see like our attendance rates are about 18% higher than the national averages.
Wow, that is incredible. So you started in Bangladesh and you were both living there at the time and had just met through your kids going to school. How did you meet each other?
We met through a mutual friend, Regina. All of our children were at school and our husbands were at work. And so Priscilla, Regina, and I were trying to figure out how to spend our days there wisely. And we had heard of a group going to the U.S. or going to these schools to deliver food. And so that's how, we all got it started. Yeah, we all pitched in, yeah.
So I want to talk about how the organization has grown over the years? Because you clearly, if you go to the Thrive website and look at the statistics on the work that's being done, it's great. So I'd love for one of you to talk about sort of the trajectory of its growth and organization to how it is now.
I'll start, then I'll let John pop in here for a sec.
Okay.
Its growth has been slow and steady. One thing that's made us really unique and why we've been able to sustain and not leave the countries, even if there's fires or hardtalls or terrorist attacks, you name it, we continue to work at the schools each day. And it's because we have local leadership involved and we have local people on the ground doing the work. And so that's been really like kind of our quote unquote secret sauce to keeping us really going. John, you want to share any more about that?
Yeah, in fact, and I'll mention that I've been involved probably in the last 2 years or so, so also much less sort of historical context there. But one of the things that really engaged me about Thrive was the fact that my career had been in startups, and this has a feeling of an organization that is on the cusp of being able to have a much larger impact and much longer sustainability. And the context for that is that the strategy, if you will, is different than, as Priscilla mentioned, emergency relief or something like that. And if you think about it, if you really want to change a child's life, you need to do it over 18 years or so. You can't just do it for a few months and then say goodbye and good luck. And that's a unique differentiator, I think. Another one, Priscilla just alluded to it, is the local funding, or more importantly, the local community involvement is so important. That's one of the key ingredients that helps it be that long-term sustainable. So when I first heard about it, I got really excited because I've seen so many, almost every month, we're getting emails and things, please give this emergency and da-da-da. And then you follow up 6 months later and, you can't find out what's going on there anymore. And so this is a model, if you will, that I think is somewhat rare, is unique, and is going to actually have lasting change. So it's something worth investing in. So that's why I'm involved.
That's cool. So you started in Bangladesh, and you also have programs in the Philippines. How did that get started?
That's where I moved next. So we follow the trail, the breadcrumbs, right? So I lived with my family in Bangladesh for 3 years, and then we were in the Philippines for 5 years. And so we started off there, and that's actually where we're testing a new model where we're going to pivot from the fresh food to a shelf life meal that's really high nutrition and that we can scale and take it to all sorts of places throughout the Philippines. So we're really excited to be testing that out in the next 3 months.
So the food in Bangladesh is like made that during that time and just taken to the school every day for those kids. Are they cooking at the schools at all now?
Well, the meals in Bangladesh right now are like just the vegetables and then a boiled egg. And then once a week we have shingaras, which is a little like samosa or dumpling of sort. So there's not a whole lot of cooking going on in Bangladesh right now. We're starting to try to figure that out and what that looks like there. But our main food that we're serving doesn't involve cooking.
But now you're talking about something that is sort of packaged that's not, has a shelf life, right, Priscilla?
But the exciting thing about it is it's going to be bulk packaged. And again, we're going to emulate it after our friends in South Africa who do Lunchbox Fund. But the really cool thing is we're going to be hiring mothers within the community to cook those meals. And so we're going to be able to have an opportunity for employment for people who sending their kids to the school. And we've been testing it out for the last couple months. And the enthusiasm from the mothers to get their first paycheck is pretty unbelievable. So it's really fun to be part of that.
So let's talk about the funding for Thrive, because it's basically individual people and then some foundations. Is that correct from what I looked at the website?
Yep,
Yeah.
That's correct.
So you're not reliant on any of these federal programs and federal grants that are getting chopped at this time.
We're not directly. All of our funding, 85% of our funding comes from individuals. It's pretty cool because Thrive's entry fee is $10. That feeds a kid for every day for a month. So it's accessible to most people or to many people. But we don't currently receive any of U.S. aid grants, which people are like, oh, that's so great because you don't have to worry. But we do have concerns, not just selfishly for ourselves, but also for the communities that we serve, because For example, in Bangladesh, it's the second highest USAID fund. They were the second highest U.S. funder in the world, so $500 million a year. And so what we're seeing happening already is those organizations, we're going to be competing for some of the same funds. And those communities themselves are suffering because they don't have the infrastructure and things they were relying on from the U.S. government. So we see it in two different factions. Yeah.
Right. That is definitely going to have an impact. It's going to have an impact on different things that could affect those same families that you're feeding every day.
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah,
Do you want to
yeah.
talk about that at all, John?
No, I was thinking of something related, which is, of course, I come from Silicon Valley, so I always think about what's the return on investment sort of thing. So there's one thing to sort of write a grant to try to get government funds or funds from something like that, and another is, and there's a reason I'm involved as well, is the amount of money it takes to really make a healthy kid is so different than it is in so many other places that it's almost a no-brainer to be able to say this is worth investing in, meaning even if it's just that small amount per month or whatever, and the results that you see are great because in that long-term view. So that I think is a slightly different message in that we don't depend on it as much, but it's also I think a good message for everyone else out there to think about all as they think about how they split up the pie of their charitable giving. I like to think of it as we're going to get the biggest bang for the buck, and that's what we're hoping is something that can help us going forward, so that we aren't indeed as dependent on say government sources solely, and also to be able to access a broader range of donation pools, in this country as well. Again, because that $1 or $10 or $1 million can go so much further.
I mean, like $10 a month that's an astonishingly low amount when you think about how much a cup of coffee costs here in West Marin.
Well, I mean, it's one thing that's kind of cool that the literature shows is that for every dollar spent on a school meal, it's a return on investment of $16, both in wages that are eventually earned and in health care, preventative health care. So we see our return on investment pretty strong in that way. And like to your point exactly, that $10, we spend it, at Toby's pretty quick, so blink of an eye.
No kidding. So let's talk about sort of where you are now and where you want to be in the future. And I just want to remind listeners that I'm Amanda Eichstead, and I am talking today with Priscilla Heffelfinger and Gina Gabel, who are the founders of Thrive. And Priscilla is the executive director, Gina is the president, and we have John Phelan here, who is the secretary of the board, right?
That's correct.
Of the board. And let's talk about the future of Thrive. Where are you headed? Because obviously you've got something that works, and you're probably thinking, what's next other than this program in the Philippines that you just described, Priscilla?
Well, I mean, our goal is to feed as many kids as we possibly can. So, we're headed to feeding more kids. And with this program in the Philippines, I mean, that's our next step. And if that's successful and we have enough funding to make that happen, then, I mean, as long as we can sustain ourselves, our goal is to feed as many kids as we possibly can.
I want to get a little bit more information about how you maintain those local relationships without physically being there, and how those folks stay connected to Thrive.
We do a lot of Zooming. In fact, tonight at our board retreat, we're going to be Zooming with the Bangladesh leadership team and also with the Philippines leadership team, so there's a lot of interconnection that way. Gina and I go to the countries whenever we can and spend time there to get to know the people as well. And we have a really high-touch relationship with the schools and our partnerships. So, we are on first-name basis with most of our teachers, and they send us photographs through WhatsApp and throughout the day so we can see that the food's being sent and delivered. And it's been built slowly but thoughtfully. So I think that the relationships have been really high-touch and have had quite deep, meaningful relationships. I think Gina and I, they're some of our best friends, actually.
Well, the relationship thing is key in all aspects of our world, so that's really telling that you have those strong bonds with those folks. Have you had any, pitfalls or things that came up that were just like, oh no, what are we going to do?
Well, the pandemic was one.
Oh yeah, for everybody.
Guess what? So I actually and this is where I think the local community was so key, is that at the time I wrote a note to the board and said, I think we're going to go on pause. There's this little thing coming around. We don't know what it is. And the local leadership said, Priscilla, are you crazy? These families are going to be hungrier than ever. And our team was like, we're going to get some hazmat suits for the deliveries. And we quickly pivoted from the daily school meals to a family food pack once a month. And we unexpectedly, that turned into an opportunity for the homework to get exchanged, because they didn't have Zoom and all the things that we have here. So they would exchange homework packets at the same time they'd get the food packet. And we'd hear stories like, for example, this one father came to the school and said, I was going to have to marry off my daughter because we just didn't have any money, but that food packet kept it so we could keep taking her to school. And now she's in nursing school. So it's like those kind of stories, you're like, wow, a flour and eggs makes a huge difference. It's amazing.
Right. Any other things that have come along that were just like out of the blue that sort of shocked you and made your work more difficult?
Well, one thing that, early on, we've learned from we've tried a lot of different models and a lot of different ways to get this done. And early on, there were hartals in Bangladesh. And this was within our first year, which is like protests, and schools are shut down during that time. But we still had food donations to give away. So one day, Priscilla and I were like, well, why don't we just drive around and hand food out the window of our van? And so we ignorantly get in this car and have all of our food, and Priscilla's driving, and we had somebody driving, and we were handing the food out. And it got a little dangerous because people were so hungry that kids and families would come running to our car. And I mean, it was a little bit of a scary moment where you're like, that is not the way we want to do this operation.
Because someone could get hurt or stampede kind of situation.
yes.
Our Taylor Swift moment.
The classic Who concert, Stampede. Well, I was like, if any of you have any stories, like John, you're talking about sort of coming into the organization more recently and just like getting the download on what was happening and saying, this makes a lot of sense. I know you, before we came on the air, you mentioned you had recently retired, and just sort of any other sort of like stories that just stick out in your mind about sort of maybe, Priscilla, like what you were saying with the daughter that didn't get married off because they had the food and now she's in nursing school. Are there any other stories that you'd like to share with the listeners? Because I think that those types of things are so important.
So, like I said, we had been delivering boiled eggs, and it was in the first 3 weeks in, and we noticed that a good portion of the kids were not eating the boiled eggs. So we thought, well, do they not know they're boiled? Do they not know how to eat a boiled egg? I mean, we had no idea. And we asked one of the teachers, why? And the little girl responded and said, I'm taking it home to share with my family. And that is like the moment where we thought, this is like hunger like we've never experienced or seen before. And if you have a little 5-year-old that knows that her family, doesn't have enough food to eat, and she's going to take this little boiled egg home in a couple hours and share it with her family members, that was a point for me where, we knew we couldn't stop. We didn't know how we were going to continue at that point because we were only 3 weeks in, but we knew we couldn't stop.
What about you, Priscilla? Do you have anything like that?
Well, there's a fun story about, we work in the Philippines at this place called Dawahan Island. It's a super remote island. And I grew up as a swimmer, so this story touches me. And I think you were a swimmer as well, right? Yeah, so you'll like this one. So the kids swim all the time. That's just what you do because they're on an island. And they got the kids into swim meet. And the kids did very well in the swim meet. And they'd never even been in a pool, of course.
But they were just really good swimmers.
That was what they did, yeah. And so several of them have been very successful, both boys and girls. But one boy in particular, Louis J., has really stood out. He's now on the national team. And we have a really wonderful video where he and his family talk about how that Thrive meal, that was never an option. That gave him so much more freedom because he wasn't having to work for food. He was able to swim with his free time. And it's been really cool because not only is he really successful, but he's been helping train a lot of other swimmers at that school. And lo and behold, they're very good swimmers because that's what they do all day. So That's been fun to watch.
That's a really good one. John, anything come to your mind?
Well, since I've been involved more recently, I guess I think about the story that has yet to be told, which is more the story of Thrive. And so it's one of those that there's such an opportunity for it to grow a little bit more and go from, I'll say, just maybe 1 or 2 degrees of separation from those of us involved, and it's still a pretty small organization, to a much wider network. And Priscilla mentioned Lunchbox Fund. The scale there is so much different, and they've had celebrities and others that can help, send that message and everything else. I think that organic growth that Priscilla mentioned is still going to be a theme, but there's such an opportunity. And when I look at other things that I spend my time on, invest my time on around, even around here locally, the value of what I do for Thrive has a much bigger impact. And so there's just an opportunity waiting to happen. So I can't wait to see that story as the story of Thrive's future.
Wow, that's a great thing to say. So anything else, Gina?
I think a really good message to share is that it's just so easy to get involved. It's so easy to get involved with our work. It's so easy it's 50 cents a meal. So if you have 50 cents and you can provide that boiled egg that kid means so much to that kid.
So you are living here now, Priscilla, in West Marin, and John, you're here as well. And Gina, you're in Michigan?
Yes.
So you flew out for the board retreat.
Yes.
And how can people really get this information? How would you like them to do this? Give out the website, give out the information for the listeners of KWMR.
Yeah, I think giving out our website would be terrific. And we're actually, if anybody likes to travel overseas, we're planning these country visits starting in 2026, both of the Philippines and to Bangladesh. And we'd love to bring people along because when you see the work up in front and you get to meet the children and they meet you with high fives and can't wait to see you, you can't replace that. So we'd love for anybody to come with us.
Oh, that's very cool. Well, website, access, information?
It's www.thrive-global.org.
Thrive-global.org is the organization. And I really appreciate you all taking the time out from your board retreat to come to the radio station and do this interview. It was fortuitous because I was just going to talk to Priscilla, but turned out we had some people here, and I've actually learned some brand new skills today and how to do this type of recording at the radio station. So thank you for helping me to expand my own horizons here at my job. So.
Well, thank you for letting us share.
Yeah,
This
you're
is
very
amazing.
welcome.
Thank
you.
you.